Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. A quick housekeeping note. We had two YouTube channels, the Chess Angle podcast one, of course, and then the Long Island Chess Club channel, which I used for instructional videos. Those were sort of regular mainstream chess videos with a board and everything. However, I have decided to consolidate those. That migration has already taken place. So I'm going to be deleting the Long Island Chess Club channel and putting everything on the Chess Angle channel. So again, this is on YouTube. So the Chess Angle channel will, of course, continue to have complete podcast episodes, but it will also have instructional chess videos as well. So it'll be like one-stop shopping for busy adults. I will be creating separate playlists for your convenience. So the podcast will be in one playlist and the instructional videos will be in another. So it should be very organized, but I just wanted to let you know that. So it's a one and done type of thing. So if you haven't already, please check out the Chess Angle YouTube channel. There is a direct link in the show notes, or you could just search for us on YouTube. And I decided that one channel just makes more sense for my workflow. I thought it might have been a better idea to separate it because one was the podcast, one was instructional videos, but it just didn't work out. I mean, I'm doing this more for selfish reasons, if I'm being honest. It's going to be much easier to manage if it's just one channel, but that in turn will translate to more convenience for you as well. And that being said, let's jump into our listener mailbag. Our first message is from Cassie, and they say, "Hi, Neil. I'm really enjoying the podcast. I joined a club for the first time last year after playing casually most of my life. I am halfway through my first big tournament, which runs over the summer near my hometown. I appreciate how your show is helping me build the context and mindset for how to relate to the club and especially the tournament. I have a question about opening study. I'm around 1500 ECF, I guess that's the English Chess Federation, and at my level, there are certain things I never get to practice. I like Alekhine's defense, but people almost always just defend their e-pawn instead of playing 2e5, which I know is supposed to be better for black, but usually leads to positions I find boring. I'm learning the Sicilian, but only get an open Sicilian once in maybe 10 games. I'm getting a lot of experience against the Alapin. But of course, when I come to play high-rated opponents, they'll be comfortable with open Sicilians while I won't have had much practice. Just wondering if you've come across this issue and if you have any thoughts. Do you just accept and adapt to the ecosystem at your level, or do you find ways to get games in the systems you want to practice? I also really like your suggestion of 1e6 against anything. Right now, I'm happy as white playing a ready Catalan thing, but my black repertoire is still in flux. I like being able to improvise and make different choices each game, and 1e6 sounds like a good foundation to do that. I will give it a go. Thanks for all your work making the podcast. It's really helping to fill in gaps in my knowledge, and I'm enjoying going back through the old episodes. Take care, and may your next game be intriguing." Well, thank you, Cassie. I really appreciate it. Some interesting comments. Now, as far as 1e6 as black against anything, yeah, that's good stuff. Now, you say your black repertoire is in flux, but you're playing a ready Catalan thing as white. That's very common. Most players at this level, they're more comfortable with the white pieces, and they're still kind of working things out on the black side of it, but that is something that you need to do if you want to be a competent tournament player. And yeah, 1e6, like you say, it does give some flexibility to improvise and make different choices based on what white does. And that's the main thing with 1e6. It's very, very flexible. Now, as far as the Sicilian defense, you say you're not getting open Sicilians. I mean, that's a tricky one. The way I see it, and I'm not an expert on the Sicilian, I really don't play it, but the stronger your opposition, the more you need to know. And the Sicilian is a very difficult opening. There's a lot of theory to it. I mean, if you play something like the Najdorf especially. But I will say this, against weaker or low-rated players or beginners, you can pretty much play whatever you want, and playing a Sicilian won't be a problem. But yeah, as you play higher-rated players, you're going to really have to know what you're doing about the Sicilian, because they're going to know those lines very, very well. And yes, I just do adapt to the ecosystem at your level. You just have to understand, playing a higher rated player, they're going to know the openings a lot more and the lines and the theory. Playing a lower rated player, you can get away with a little bit more. Now, certain systems will translate into both higher and lower rating levels. For example, if I play a London or a Kali, not much is going to be different against a lower or a higher rated. The only difference is the lower rated might blunder a bit more, but essentially it's going to be the same. The higher rated player might know some anti-London systems that he might want to try, but it's basically the same. Something like the Sicilian, that's a little more spread out, so to speak. Again, you are going to have to know a lot more against a stronger player. And regarding your first paragraph, yeah, I'm really glad the show is helping you build some context for over-the-board tournaments, because most of the narrative with a lot of chess content creation seems to be about playing online. So we appreciate it, Cassie. Thanks so much for your email. Our next message is from John from Buy Me a Coffee. He bought us 3 coffees, so we really appreciate that, John. The support really helps. For those of you who are not aware, Buy Me a Coffee is our support platform. It's certainly not expected, but it's appreciated. The proceeds I get from that go right back into the show. So if you're interested in supporting us, you can check out our Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. And John writes, I'm a new listener to your podcast and also a new player to chess at age 66. My 9-year-old grandson, who has been playing chess since age 5, has inspired me to get better if I want to stop losing to him almost every game. I found your recommendations on how to study chess very useful and appreciate that you have a lot of content geared towards beginners and developing players. Enjoy some coffee on me and my grandson. Well, thanks again, John. I really appreciate it. And it just shows you're never too old to learn anything. You're 66 years young. That's great. That's awesome that you're playing with your grandson. It's a family affair. That's great to have that kind of relationship. But I wish you the best. And yeah, these kids are tough to play. Like you said, you're losing almost every game against them. Well, as you work at it, you might turn that around a bit and humble him somewhat. But I'm sure he's going to become much, much stronger than he is now. And I wish you and your grandson both the best on your chess journey. But thanks so much, John. And our final message is also from Buy Me a Coffee. It's from Raphael, who also bought us 3 coffees. We really appreciate that, Raphael. Very generous. And he writes, Hi, Neil, writing to you from Catherine, or Catherine, not sure, a small town in the Northern Territory in Australia. Well, shout out to our friends down under. And he continues, I'm working as a rural doctor and love listening to your show as a way of getting my chess fix on flights out to remote communities. Well, let me tell you, the chess angle, it's a great sort of airplane binge, right? You kick back in your chair, lie back, turn on the Bluetooth, pop in the earbuds. It's a great binge on a flight. So I will say that. But anyway, he continues, I've been enjoying your opening topics lately, but wanted to suggest that for some players, playing a wide range of different openings can be an excellent way of enriching one's chess with different positions and ideas, and maybe force you to confront a few weaknesses too. For instance, I'm in my late 30s, about 1900 Blitz, 2000 Rapid on chess.com, and I've always played the King's Gambit and Open Sicilian with white, the Giantish Gambit, and King's Indian with black. Over the last couple of years, I've also started playing the Trompowsky and Reddy with white and the Benoni and Sicilian with black. I still play my old repertoire, but have found that the variety has greatly deepened my enjoyment of the game. I agree with you that if your focus is on rating gains or you're a newer player, this may not be the best approach. But if any listeners out there are feeling stuck in a rut, I can definitely recommend branching out, even if it means a few losses along the way. Thanks again for the great podcast. I hope you win your next game. and your next few coffees are on me, Raphael. Well, thanks again, Raphael, for the coffees. You make a great point. I'm really glad you brought this up because I'm always talking about sticking with the same openings. And a large reason for that is because most of us are very time pressed. But technically, Raphael, you're correct. It is good to mix it up as far as your overall understanding. Mixing it up, and playing different openings can certainly help. But my whole thing is when you do that, it can be tough to progress because rather than focusing on a few openings thoroughly, you're kind of spreading yourself too thin. So while I stand by my theory of sticking with the same openings, kind of setting it and forgetting it, and you'll progress that way, especially if you don't have a lot of time. Technically, you're right. And you have a great attitude. For you, it's not about winning. And if you lose, you lose, and you'd want to try these different openings. Technically, you're right. And that's what we should all be doing. But my whole thing on this podcast is that for many of us, that's just not practical and that can create more work. And so my whole thing is stick with the same openings, learn those really well, and then just play them. And then you can work on other aspects of your game with the limited study time that you have. But I totally get your point of view, Raphael. A lot of people feel that way. The idea of playing the same openings and sticking with them, while I believe in that, and many others do as well, there is some criticism of that as well. And that's legitimate. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying sticking with the same openings is just a great idea if you are pressed for time, if you're a busy adult improver, which is most of us. But technically, yes, you're correct. When you expand your horizons like that, you will certainly increase your learning. But if you want to know several different openings well, that is going to be a lot of time. So it's sort of a trade-off. But thank you so much, Raphael, for your email and for the coffees. Really appreciate it. So now let's talk about old man chess. And I'm definitely qualified to speak about that. I'm over 50, so I guess that's quote unquote old. Well, for chess, that's definitely old. And I do play in that style. And we'll talk about exactly what old man chess is. I think most of you probably have an idea, but we'll get some definitions squared away in a moment. And this was inspired, the idea of discussing old man chess, by a Reddit post that I will link up in the show notes. You can check it out. I'll also be responding to some specific comments from that post. But like I said, let's square away some terms and definitions first. So what exactly is old man chess? Now I'm going to do something I normally don't like to do. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Like when people are giving some type of talk or a speech or explaining something, and there's a term, they start out, well, according to the dictionary. I try not to do that, but in trying to get sort of a consensus of what old man chess is, because we all have our own definitions. I have mine, you probably have yours. I wanted to find out, okay, is there some type of general standard or accepted definition of what old man chess is? So I actually Googled old man chess, and you know how the Google AI overview comes up? It's actually very, very well written. So I'm going to read this, and this is what it said on Google. Old man chess, quote unquote, generally refers to a playing style in chess that is solid, safe, and avoids unnecessary risks. It often involves prioritizing positional advantages, trading down to endgames, and minimizing tactical complications. This contrasts with a more aggressive or sharp style that seeks immediate attacks or tactical combinations. I think that's a good definition. I mean, that's pretty much how I thought of it. I assume it's the same for you. But then the AI gives a more detailed breakdown, which again, I think is very good. So I'm going to read that. It has these sort of sub-themes. So the first is that old man chess is solid and risk averse. Old man chess players prefer to build a reliable position rather than launch ambitious attacks that could backfire. Second theme is positional play. This style focuses on subtle advantages like pawn structure, piece placement, and controlling key squares. Next theme is trading down. When possible, players employing this style might opt to simplify the game by exchanging pieces, especially if it leads to an endgame where they have a slight advantage. Yeah, I agree with this. It sounds like they're describing me because I agree with all of this. Next is avoiding complications. They try to steer clear of complex tactical situations where they might make mistakes or fall victim to their opponent's tactics. And the last theme is that old man chess is not necessarily passive. While it can involve less dynamic play, it's not always about passivity. Players may still play actively, but with a focus on building a solid foundation. Essentially, old man chess emphasizes a more calculated and cautious approach, prioritizing long-term positional advantages over immediate tactical gains. So again, very well stated. So that is the definition and meaning of what old man chess is. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back in just a moment. And now back to the show. Now I want to add my own thoughts and additions as far as defining what old man chess is. One thing I would add is when you play old man chess, you're playing the same openings with unwavering consistency. Kind of goes with my set it and forget it thing. That's technically part of old man chess if you think about it. They play the same openings, and really the same openings and variations they've been using their whole life. And they're reluctant to mix it up in the slightest. Like, I do believe you have to mix it up a little bit. But true old man chess, they are not changing. They are playing the same openings. They're not going to even do the slightest change in variation or anything. Often they will play system openings. And the most common old man chess opening for me would be the King's Indian attack. Not the King's Indian defense. That's a defense for black against d4. But the King's Indian attack, which is generally won knight f3. That's the most popular old man chess opening. And usually what happens is it's almost like a ready type of thing. You play knight f3 and then g3 and then bishop g2 and castles. That's the basics of the King's Indian attack. I'm oversimplifying. But not necessarily only system openings, okay? I've seen old men, quote unquote old men chess. They'll play the knight off, which is the furthest thing from a system opening, simply because they've been using the knight off for years. However, many will call using a system opening as playing old man chess. But for me, it's not necessarily about system openings. Old man chess is about using the same openings over and over, whether it's a system opening or not. But again, that King's Indian attack, that is certainly the most common in my OTB experience. So whenever I see, if I have the black pieces and my opponent's playing old man chess and I see one knight f3 and then g3, I'm like, okay, here we go. Not a problem to play against, but King's Indian attack is definitely the OG old man chess opening. And speaking of that unwavering consistency with openings, for my fellow musicians out there, I'm reminded of some of these older cats, quote unquote, back when I was doing gigs 100 years ago. A lot of these older musicians, like if they've been playing the song, let's say All of Me in the key of C for like 40 years, they're not changing for anybody. Because the thing is, when you're a musician, when you play certain standards, especially if you're dealing with a vocalist or something, sometimes you may have to change key. But again, these older guys, they're not changing for anybody. They're like, yeah, I do All of Me in the key of C, like deal with it. It kind of reminds me of chess as far as the old man system or the old man style of play, where they're just not going to change their openings in the slightest, not even a slight tweak or a slight variation. So as I mentioned earlier, by definition, I play old man chess because I play in a very safe, solid manner. I like trading into endgames. I am risk averse on the board. I do play system openings, at least for white. I mean, some of my black openings could be system openings. They're more like semi-system openings because there's not as much theory. But anyway, I also have a set repertoire. I do like the slow positional squeeze where you kind of grind your opponent down. And for me, that has kept me in good stead on the over-the-board tournament scene. I've done very well playing old man chess, and I think it definitely has some benefits. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. Now let's talk about tactics here, because old man chess seems to be the complete polar opposite of having a tactical style, which definitely is true. But for me, even though I'm a quote-unquote positional player, I can be very tactical if I need to be, meaning that if that's what the position calls for, if it's a dynamic position where I have the initiative, I will absolutely go king hunting. And I had a few recent tournament games where that actually happened. It was very O'Neill-like the way I was playing instead of my usual slow squeeze. Now, it's not my favorite way to play. I don't really like those crazy tactical battles. Not a fan, but I can do it if that's what's needed, as long as I can see my way through it. If the position is telling me I need to bash the center open and play for mate, I will certainly do that. But I'm also aware that a successful attack doesn't necessarily mean checkmate. It could be forcing your opponent into trading into an inferior endgame, in which case you can still call the attack successful. And that's a common misconception with a lot of players. They're on a mating attack. They don't mate the king, but they transpose into a superior endgame. They think somehow the attack has failed. No, not at all. If you can force your player to trade down, again, into a winning endgame, your attack was successful, because if you have that winning endgame, it's just a matter of technique, and then you end up winning the game. Something else with tactics, and this is something you've probably heard. Some will say that in the end, that tactics always wins out. It's that old tactics versus positional thing. Now, specifically, they'll say if you're a strong positional or strategic player and your opponent is all about tactics, he's very sharp tactically, that his tactics will always win out, right? That tactics are going to eat positional play for lunch, so to speak. Despite the fact that your position is quote unquote better, it doesn't matter because he's going to beat you with a tactical sequence. Now, yes, that does happen. It does happen. It happens quite a bit, but that's not always the case. It's not always the case. And I've shut down many tactical opponents by stronger positional play. I think it also has to do with the skill of the player. In other words, if the tactical player beats the positional player, it's not so much that tactics is always going to be better than positional ideas. It's that that tactical player was probably the stronger player to begin with. But I think if the positional player is a stronger player overall to begin with, he'll beat out the tactical player. But it's certainly an interesting battle. And I'm not going to say positional ideas are always going to win. Tactics are going to win out sometimes, but not always. A lot of times the positional player will win. But that's certainly an interesting battle, the tactics versus positional play, that makes the game so interesting and fascinating. Next thing, Old Man Chess reminds me of Jonathan Spielman's plus equals mode from the 7 Deadly Chess Sins. Now, let me explain what plus equals mode is. The engines now tend to use numbers like pawn units, but the older engines would use symbols. So plus equals mode would mean that white was, say, slightly better, right? Equals plus would mean that black was slightly better, that type of thing. And plus equals mode, again, this is championed by Grandmaster Jonathan Spielman. What you do with plus equals mode, you play just for a small strategic advantage the entire game. You're not looking to blow your opponent off the board, but you constantly during the game have this slight advantage where, again, you're just slightly better the whole game. And that's often very unsettling for your opponent, and they may eventually crack or just outright blunder. That's what plus equals mode is. Again, there's a whole section on that in the 7 Deadly Chess Sins. But plus equals mode, if you think about it, that is old man chess, where you're just playing for a small advantage the whole game, and you're slowly kind of grinding your opponent. That's what it made me think of. Now let's talk about some advantages and disadvantages of old man chess, because even though I believe in old man chess, I play it myself, there are some valid points regarding possible disadvantages, and I want to be fair. I don't want to be one-sided, even though I'm kind of biased because I do like old man chess, but I kind of want to look at both sides of it. So let's talk about the advantages of old man chess. Some of this we touched upon, but with old man chess, there is a focus on simply not blundering, because it's a very careful style, and not blundering is what it's all about. I mean, there's a theory that simply by not making gross mistakes, you can add hundreds of points to your rating, or at least boost it significantly. And with old man chess, there is a focus on mistake avoidance. So not blundering, again, is very, very powerful, and that's a major tenet of old man chess. Second thing, with this style, there's a focus on having a very safe, a quote-unquote safe position, which means you're likely to play what they call tightening up, or sometimes people call them housekeeping moves, which are very important. Now, what is a tightening up or housekeeping move? You're just making sure all your pieces are safe. Maybe you're moving a pawn to prevent your opponent from jumping on a certain square. Maybe you're making sure your rooks are connected. You're overprotecting a piece or a square. Those sort of tidying up moves, they're very, very important. And when you play old man chess, you're more likely to play those. In addition, you're also more likely to be aware of your opponent's plans because old man chess is very defensive minded. And one of the major mistakes at the amateur level is that you don't spend enough time thinking about your opponent's plans or you're completely unaware of them. And then the final advantage of old man chess is that your opponents in these cases, they're unable to come up with a plan in simple or boring positions. Like a lot of amateurs, they want to attack something or check the king or set up a tactic. But in these boring old man positions, none of those tactical ideas exist. And so the player's like, well, I don't know, what do I do? What do we do? And they might make a mistake. Now let's look at the other side of it. Let's look at some possible disadvantages of old man chess. One is that aggressive or off-book moves, which is generally not part of old man chess, those type of moves can be good when appropriate because you need to create problems for your opponent and force them to think. That's when the mistakes happen. In other words, at the amateur level, these types of moves are sometimes more likely to induce a mistake than the quote-unquote correct move. That may sound a little counterintuitive, but it's a reality of over-the-board chess at the amateur level. When you play an aggressive or off-book move, it might even be an unsound move. Sometimes those, again, are more likely to cause mistakes from your opponent than the quote-unquote correct move, because when you play that correct move, it might be a very solid move and they'll easily know what to do. But if the move's a little bit aggressive or a little strange, that might throw them off. But if you play old man chess, you might miss those types of ideas. And then the second disadvantage is that draws are much more likely when you play in this ultra solid or tame fashion. That's something I accept with my own games. And if you are going to grind down your opponent and win, that can be very, very tough. One of the ideas with old man chess is that you trade down into an end game where you might have a slight advantage and then wear your opponent down. But sometimes you may not be able to win it. In other words, even though you have that slight advantage, it becomes very, very difficult to convert it into a win, and you may end up getting the draw. So it's double-edged. Like when you convert into an endgame, which is part of this style, it may be so even and so boring that you're not able to find a winning idea, especially if it's like a rook and pawn type ending, because those can be nightmares to win. So you are taking the chance that if you enter an endgame and your advantage is only very slight, you may not have enough sort of juice in the position to win it. So that is a disadvantage of old man chess, is by avoiding complications, draws may be more likely. Now, before we get to some of the comments in the Reddit post, I would cap it off by saying this about the old man style of chess. The most lethal combination is combining old man chess with tactical skill, being able to pivot, right? Knowing when to pivot between old man chess and now it's just tactics. It's pure tactics. You have to know, again, when to pivot. That's what it's all about. A lot of younger players play old man chess very effectively, just as a thing. When we say old man chess, obviously it comes because a lot of old men play it, but people of all ages play old man chess. Even Magnus plays old man chess, if you think about it. He will enter a series of trades, go into an endgame, and grind the slightest advantage to a win. And he can do it because he's Magnus. So it's not just for old people. In fact, I'm reminded of a game, I think Simon Williams did a video on it. It was a London system where Magnus traded quite a number of pieces in the middle game. And in this end game, his advantage was so slight, but because he's Magnus, he was able to convert it into a win. So you'll see Magnus do old man chess all the time. I mean, you'll see titled players do that as well, because going into an endgame with just that slight advantage, they have the skills and the chops that they can easily convert it to a win. Whereas for those of us at the amateur level, if we trade down into a very slight endgame advantage, we may not get there. We may end up drawing. But again, old man chess is not just for old people. It just refers to that ultra careful and solid style of play. So anyone can play this style, which I think is extremely effective at the club level. I think it works very, very well for amateurs. We're going to take one more quick break, and we'll be back in just a moment. And now back to the show. So now for this final segment, let's go to some of the comments on the Reddit post. So with these comments, remember the question, the Reddit post was, what is old man chess? That was the title. So it was phrased as a question. I cherry picked certain comments because, as you know, with Reddit, people start getting silly going down rabbit holes. So I tried to pick the comments that were relevant and on point. So to answer the question, what is old man chess? The first comment, generally it refers to playing solid risk-free positions that don't require intense calculation. So for example, if you had the choice between going for a promising but complicated attack or trading down into an equal material endgame where you had a slightly better pawn structure, the latter would be old man chess. Yes, I agree with that. Next comment, as you get older, your raw calculation ability may decline, but your experience and positional understanding improve. Old man chess is about leaning into that strength, avoiding sharp tactical battles that require deep calculation, and instead steering the game towards slow positional and grindy positions. These are the kinds of games where experience matters more than speed, and you can draw on your familiarity with typical plans, structures, and subtle nuances to outplay your opponent. That's a great point. And the idea of avoiding tactical complications, I think, is important. That gets to the heart of it. And when you're playing these club time controls, these game 90s, these game 75s, when you enter a difficult tactical position, like let's say you sacrifice a piece, but it's a true sacrifice, you're not sure if it was correct, and you need a lot of time to figure out the ensuing moves, that's a tough place to be in a club level time control because you could easily get into time pressure. Next comment, I returned to chess after about 35 years off. I found that my tactical ability, which was always pretty darn good, had eroded enormously. I figured it would come back after I played a lot, but it hasn't. But I think I'm positionally at least as good and probably better than I ever was. So I find myself, as you say, steering the game towards slow positional and grindy positions. Positions where there's only one thing going on, a weak backward pawn my opponent's stuck with, say, and grinding the heck out of it. Well, that's it. Now, it's funny, someone responded to that his tactical ability might have been weakened because he stepped away for 35 years, not because he's older. So I thought that was interesting. But I think we can all agree as we get older, as far as handling those sharp tactical positions, I think it's more difficult. I don't think our brain deteriorates as some people make it out to be, especially if you try to stay healthy, but that's a separate thing. But steering the game towards more positional ideas, that's definitely old man chess. And then continuing this idea about tactics, someone said older people aren't as good at tactical brawls, which require accurate calculation and energy. In contrast, younger players in general have a tendency to go all out in sharp positions. So old man chess just refers to quiet positional games where you avoid insane complications and use positional concepts to gain an advantage. That's very well said. And I like the part about avoiding insane complications. That's big. And he says, think Karpov or Kramnik. Karpov is definitely probably the one that really comes to mind for me, but I would also add Botvinnik, Petrosian, another big one, Rubinstein. These guys played a lot of old man chess. Next comment was, in my book, old man chess is the same as playing only systems. When I was in a chess club in the 90s, I ended up quitting because at 16 years old, me and 2 or 3 others around my age were the youngest there by a margin of like 40 years. The reason for that, people younger than us were in the kids division. People older than us, but younger than something like 50 or 60, often had a full-time job, so no time to spend 4 hours twice a week on chess. All of those people played systems with both white and black, and they were able to just play their thing without even looking at what the opponent was doing for at least 15 moves or so. I call that old man chess. At some point, you learn the system and beat these players, not because you are a better chess player, but because you just learned some ways to throw them off their theory, and then you can roast them. All right, that's interesting. Now, he actually makes some important points there. If you do play system openings, people are going to try to crack them. So what he said about going on autopilot for 15 moves or so, like he says, they can play their thing without even looking at what the opponent's doing for 15 moves. That's actually a good point. That is a big trap if you play system openings and old man chess. You can't go on autopilot. So if you play the London, I'll just use a very common example. If you play the London system, you can't say, oh, this is a system opening. I can play it against anything black plays. I don't even have to worry about what he's playing in the beginning. That is not true at all, because some of these anti-London systems, they're going to try to mess up your formation from the start, and you got to be aware of those. A lot of them center around an early c5 and queen b6, for example, so you cannot go on autopilot. If you're going to be a system opening person or play old man chess, which many of us do, you still need to think, look at your opponent's moves, and don't fall into the trap of just responding automatically, because then you're going to get into trouble. So his idea about not even looking at your opponent is doing and just moving, that's a very, very important point. The other thing, if you play systems, you do need to know that people are going to try to find ways to get you off book and mess with your head, especially if you're playing at the club level, because when you play at the club and you're facing the same people, rotating against the same opponents, they're going to know you play these systems and they're going to try to trip you up. So it is something you need to be aware of. And then the final comment, play over Capablanca's games. That's old man chess. Not trying to come up with any kind of novel approach, just sound, straightforward positional play. It's how I always try to play at the club level. It's extremely effective. Well, I agree. Many people are going to disagree. Many people might even go as far as to say, that's nonsense, just play tactics. It's all about tactics. It's not going to work. I don't agree. But again, I find the whole tactics versus positional idea one of the most fascinating sort of battles in chess. So to wrap this up, a reminder, check out and subscribe to our Chess Angle YouTube channel if you haven't already. I'll repeat what I said earlier. In addition to all of our podcast episodes, there are now instructional chess videos on there as well. Really appreciate you listening, and as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.